to Liberty Report. I'm your host, Chadwick. Today we have a significant development to discuss as the Supreme Court has agreed to examine the case questioning the eligibility of President Donald Trump to run for federal office. This case stems from a ruling by the Colorado Supreme Court, which determined that Trump should be barred from appearing on the Republican primary ballot in the state. The fact that arguments will be heard on the expedited schedule on February 8th indicates that a prompt ruling is expected. This ruling could have far-reaching implications, potentially establishing guidelines for how other states handle similar matters. Joining us today is our legal expert, Professor Johnson, to shed some light on this case. Professor Johnson, what can you tell us about the significance of the Supreme Court's involvement?
Thank you, Chadwick. The Supreme Court's involvement in this case is crucial as it will provide clarity on the eligibility of individuals involved in insurrection to run for the highest office in the country. The rulings in both Colorado and Maine, where Trump is also facing a similar challenge, are currently on hold pending further litigation. Trump remains on the ballot in both states.
It's interesting to see how this case could impact the upcoming primaries. What are the arguments being made by both sides?
On one side, we have Colorado Secretary of State Gina Griswold, a Democrat, who is calling for clarity regarding the eligibility of individuals involved in insurrection to run for office. He urges the court to prioritize the case and issue a ruling as soon as possible. On the other side, Trump's campaign and Republicans argue that any attempt to disqualify him from the ballot constitutes partisan election interference and undermines the principles of fairness and due process.
The presumption of innocence and the right to a fair trial are fundamental principles that must be upheld. How does this case relate to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, Professor Johnson?
Excellent question, Chadwick. This case raises important legal questions regarding the interpretation of the 14th Amendment. It's crucial to remember that Trump has not been convicted of insurrection, and the provision should not be misused to target individuals based on political motivations. Supreme Court's ruling will provide guidance on how this amendment should be applied in cases like these.
Thank you, Professor Johnson, for your insights. Now let's turn to the potential implications of this case. If the Supreme Court rules in favor of Trump, he will rightfully remain on the ballot. It is essential to respect the democratic process and allow the American people to decide their preferred candidates. However, we must also consider the potential for retaliatory actions from Americans if Trump is unjustly disqualified. Suggestions have already been made that Joe Biden could face similar fate. This highlights the need for a fair and impartial ruling that upholds the right of all individuals, regardless of their political affiliations. As we approach the primary season, the plaintiffs, along with Colorado's Secretary of State, Gina Griswold, have requested a swift ruling. The deadline for candidate certification in Colorado is approaching, and the state's primary election is scheduled for March 5th, along with more than a dozen other states. That's all the time we have for today's Liberty Report. Thank you for joining. Oh, also, we can't forget, yesterday was January 6th. A new movie featuring me about America's shaman called Q Sent Me was released yesterday on My Movies Plus. I highly encourage everyone to watch as the truth prevails. Remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay free. See you tomorrow.